Fail quietly, help. Just like you did at Juilliard. The whisper sliced through the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom, like a surgeon's blade cutting into exposed flesh. 650 guests, hedge fund managers in Brioni suits, socialites dripping Cartier, Broadway producers who could buy silence with a phone call, turned their heads in perfect, horrifying unison. On the live stream, 3.4 million people heard every syllable. Patricia Pierce, 20 years old, stood frozen under spotlights that burned white-hot against her skin. The $35 navy Target dress she'd carefully steamed that morning in the garrison's laundry room, the same room where she'd scrubbed Isla's breakfast dishes at 6 a.m., now felt like a confession of everything she'd never be allowed to become. Her hands trembled at her sides, still smelling faintly of Mrs. Meyer's lavender cleaning spray from a high chair she'd wiped down 3 hours earlier. Roderick Vaylor stood inches away in an $8,000 Tom Ford tuxedo, his perfectly veneered teeth gleaming with a particular cruelty that comes easy to men who've never heard the word no without a lawyer present. Two-time Tony winner. Grammy laureate. The phantom tenor whose face smiled from Lincoln Center billboards stretching 40 feet high. His cologne probably cost more than Patricia made in a month. "Let's see if the help can actually sing," he announced to the chandeliered ballroom, his voice honeyed with contempt, practiced, theatrical, designed for the back row. "Or if she's just good at taking up space." Laughter rippled through the front tables. Polite. Uncomfortable. The kind that says I'm not sure what's happening, but I know who signs the checks. But what Roderick didn't know, what he couldn't have known despite sitting on that Juilliard scholarship committee 7 years ago, despite hearing her nail the Queen of the Night aria when she was just 15, despite voting to blacklist her and then sleeping soundly every night since, was that the woman he was about to humiliate in front of 3.4 million witnesses had a voice he'd spent 8 years stealing. And she was about to take it back. Why was Roderick Vaylor, a man worth $18 million, so terrified of a nanny making $650 a week that he needed to destroy her in front of the world? What had happened 7 years ago that made his hand shake, just slightly, just for a second, when he recognized her face? And why did his sound engineer, Emmett Slade, watching from the booth above the ballroom, suddenly look like he might vomit into the mixing board? To understand why this moment would end a career, save a life, and change an industry forever, we need to rewind. Back to when Patricia Pierce was 15 years old and had everything. Before she lost it all because of one impossible choice. If stories about second chances matter to you, if you believe one person's courage can break a system designed to silence them, stay with this. Because what you're about to witness isn't just revenge. It's resurrection. 3 minutes earlier, Patricia had been standing in the service corridor backstage, invisible. The corridor smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and the lilies someone had arranged in 14-foot vases for the gala. She could see the grand ballroom through a gap in the velvet curtains, crystal chandeliers dripping light like frozen waterfalls, tables covered in cream silk, centerpieces that cost more than her monthly rent. The garrison sat at table 3, front and center. Levi in his usual gray Armani, Catherine in emerald Valentino that made her look like old money incarnate. And between them 5-year-old Isla, wearing a pink tulle dress that had required 20 minutes of negotiation and one minor tantrum to get on. Patricia was supposed to stay hidden. Keep Isla calm during the performance. Intervene if the child got restless. Be present but invisible, the way good help always is. On the monitor mounted to the wall, she could see the live stream counter climbing. 3.2 million viewers. 3.3 million. Roderick Vaylor's biggest audience ever. The stated purpose of tonight's Voices of Tomorrow gala was noble, practically glowing with virtue: raise funds for music therapy for children with autism. 650 guests paying $800 per ticket. Over $500,000 before the night even started. The cruelty was that Marcus needed that exact therapy. Patricia's 12-year-old brother. Nonverbal, autistic. Beautiful in the way that breaks your heart because you know the world will never see him the way you do. He communicated through an AAC device, a tablet that turned his finger taps into a robotic voice. He had violent meltdowns 3 to 4 times a week, headbanging and biting himself until Patricia sang Pai Jesu, and his heart rate stabilized on the monitor the nurses watched. The therapy cost $68,000 a year. Medicaid covered $22,000. Patricia was $8,200 behind on payments and had 14 days before Bright Futures Behavioral Center discharged him permanently. The waiting list to get back in was 6 months. His regression could be permanent. And tonight, Roderick Vaylor would raise over $500,000 in Marcus's name. 7% of it would actually reach children like him. Patricia had found the tax documents 3 hours ago, sitting in the green room while Isla napped. IRS Form 990, publicly available, laid out in black and white. Of the $1.2 million Roderick's Foundation raised annually, only $87,000 went to programs. The rest disappeared into administrative costs and salaries, which included $425,000 to Vaylor Productions LLC. Her phone was still in her apron pocket, the PDF downloaded, the evidence right there. But who would believe a nanny? On stage, Roderick finished his opening set to thunderous applause. He smiled, bowed, gracious and humble in the way only the truly powerful can afford to be. The orchestra transitioned to soft background jazz. Champagne glasses clinked. Conversations resumed at a tasteful murmur. That's when Isla started screaming. Not the building whine of a child getting fussy. A full-throated glass-shattering shriek that cut through the ballroom like a fire alarm. "I want the singing lady." Patricia's stomach dropped. She pushed through the curtain into the corridor, where Isla had somehow escaped her parents' table. The child was red-faced, tears streaming, hitting herself in the legs the way she did when she was overstimulated. "Isla, baby, it's okay. I want the singing lady. The one who sings the pretty song." 650 heads turned toward the service entrance. Catherine Garrison appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of mortification. Behind her, Regina Van Buren, Catherine's best friend, Levi's sister, and unbeknownst to the public, Roderick's secret wife, watched with a kind of judgment that comes easy to women who've never scrubbed a toilet. "Patricia." Catherine's voice was ice-wrapped in silk. "Handle this." "I'm trying, Mrs. Garrison, she just needs." "Not here." Catherine grabbed Patricia's wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to make the power dynamic unmistakable. "You're embarrassing us." Catherine Garrison, who had never once asked Patricia her last name in 18 months of employment, dragged her through the velvet curtains and into the grand ballroom. 650 faces turned in unison. Patricia's $35 Target dress, the only formal dress she owned, bought 3 years ago and carefully preserved, suddenly felt like evidence. The juice stain on the sleeve from Isla's tantrum that morning glowed under the chandeliers like a scarlet letter. Her hands still smelled like cleaning spray. The live stream chat exploded across the monitor backstage. "Who is that? Why is the help in the ballroom? This is awkward AF." Patricia's eyes found Levi Garrison at table 3. Her employer. The man who paid her $650 a week to raise his daughter while he managed billions. He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable, unwilling to make eye contact. And then Roderick Vaylor saw her. For 1 microsecond, so brief that most people missed it, his smile fractured. He knew her. 7 years collapsed into a single moment. Patricia at 15, standing in room 301 at Juilliard, singing Der Holly Rake for the scholarship committee. The panel of 5 judges leaning forward, mesmerized. Roderick Vaylor, 28 years old and already a rising star, sitting in the corner with a pen gripped so tight his knuckles went white. She had been the only finalist that year who could hit F6 cleanly. The committee had whispered after she finished, "That's the best audition we've heard in a decade." And Roderick had voted to destroy her. Back in the present, his smile returned. Wider. Colder. He made his decision in the space between heartbeats, humiliate her before she could speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," Roderick announced, his voice filling the ballroom with practiced ease, "we have an unexpected guest." The band stopped playing. He crossed the stage and grabbed Patricia's wrist, not violently, but with the casual control of someone who'd never been told he couldn't touch. He pulled her toward center stage, under the spotlights, in front of the cameras. Someone who once thought she had talent. Patricia's internal voice screamed, "Run. Just run. You're a nanny. You clean toilets. You scrub floors at Lincoln Center and refill coffee at a diner until 1 a.m. and sleep 4 hours a night in a Bronx studio apartment with roaches and broken heating. You have no power here. You are nobody." But then the giant screen behind Roderick flickered. A video montage began playing. "Children We're Helping" in elegant script across the top. Smiling faces of kids in therapy centers, using art supplies, playing instruments. And then Marcus. 12 years old, sitting at a table at Bright Futures Behavioral Center, using his AAC device. The clip was maybe 30 seconds. Someone had filmed him tapping out words, music, happy, safe. The camera caught his small smile, the one he only showed when Patricia sang to him. Text overlay appeared, Marcus Pierce, age 12, finding his voice through music. Patricia's throat closed. She hadn't known he was in the promotional video. Bright Futures had gotten consent from her aunt, Marcus's legal guardian, without telling her. They'd used his face to raise money that would never reach him. Tears burned hot behind her eyes. Roderick leaned close. His cologne was suffocating. He switched off his own microphone with a subtle flick of his thumb. But Patricia's mic was still live. Emmett Slade, the sound engineer in the booth, had made sure of it. Roderick whispered directly into her ear, his voice barely audible in the ballroom but crystal clear to 3.4 million people watching online. Fail quietly, help. Just like you did at Juilliard. The live stream chat detonated. Did he just, is her mic on? Oh my God, someone clip this. Patricia's hands stopped trembling. Marcus was watching this from his hospital bed at Bright Futures, where the nurses let him use the iPad during evening quiet time. Her 12-year-old brother who couldn't speak but who typed Sister Sing. I safe on his device when she came home from her third job at 1:30 a.m. The world was watching. Enough. Roderick stepped back, switching his microphone back on, his smile returning to full wattage. Sing for us, darling. Show everyone what 7 years of humility has taught you. He turned to the conductor, snapped his fingers with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never been denied anything. Der Holly Rake. The Queen of the Night aria. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. This aria was operatic legend. Mozart's most punishing composition. The second-act revenge aria from the Magic Flute, where the Queen commands her daughter to commit murder. It required a coloratura soprano to sustain F6, 1396.91 Hz, with crystalline precision. One of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire. Roderick had never sung it publicly. Always claimed it wasn't his style. Let's see, he continued, his voice dripping theatrical concern, if she remembers how to reach for something higher than a mop bucket. Scattered, nervous laughter from the tables. Levi Garrison looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Catherine's face had gone pale. Patricia looked at the conductor. The older man's eyes were kind, surprised, uncertain. She gave him a single, small nod. The conductor raised his baton. Patricia's hands, which had been shaking 30 seconds ago, were now perfectly still. Because Roderick Vaylor couldn't know, that Patricia had been practicing this exact aria every night for 5 years. In the bathroom of her Bronx studio apartment with the broken tiles and cracked mirror. After her third job ended at 1 a.m. Singing at a whisper so the neighbors wouldn't complain. Recording herself on a cracked iPhone 8 and studying every note, every breath, every transition. Singing to Marcus through the thin wall, because it was the only thing that calmed his meltdowns when the world became too loud. And in 5 years, practicing 6 nights a week, she had never missed a note. Not once. The orchestra began. The opening notes of Mozart's most impossible aria filled the Plaza Ballroom like a dare wrapped in silk. 650 people held their breath. Roderick Vaylor smiled, certain he was watching a woman's public execution. What he didn't know was that Patricia Pierce had been preparing for this moment in ways he couldn't imagine. Not with expensive coaches or fancy studios, but in a bathroom that smelled like mildew and desperation, singing to a brother who couldn't speak but who knew when the notes were perfect. And she was about to show 3.4 million people exactly what Roderick Vaylor had been faking for 8 years. 7 years earlier, Patricia Pierce stood in room 301 at Juilliard's Paul Hall, 15 years old and terrified in the way only someone who knows exactly how much is riding on the next 3 minutes can be. June 2018. Scholarship Finals. The room smelled like old wood and the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. 5 judges sat behind a long table, notepads open, faces professionally neutral. She recognized 4 of them from their headshots on the Juilliard website. The 5th was Roderick Vaylor, 28 years old, already a rising Broadway star with a face that belonged on billboards. He'd bought his committee seat with a $500,000 donation 6 months earlier. Patricia had chosen Der Holly Rake, because it was the hardest thing she could sing. If you're going to bet everything, Bet big. The pianist played the opening bars. Patricia took one breath, felt her diaphragm expand, and began. The aria is a mother's rage turned into sound. The queen of the night commanding her daughter to commit murder, threatening eternal exile if she refuses. Mozart wrote it to be nearly unsingable, a test of whether a soprano could sustain F6, that impossibly high crystalline note that sits at 1396.91 Hz, right at the edge of human vocal capacity. Patricia hit it and held it for 6 seconds. Crystal clear. No waver. No strain. When she finished, the room was silent. Not polite pause silent. Stunned silent. One of the judges, Dr. Callahan, the head of the vocal performance department, leaned forward and whispered to the colleague beside him, just loud enough for Patricia to hear, "That's the best audition I've heard in 10 years. Patricia's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She looked at Roderick Vaylor. His smile was frozen in place, professional and empty. His knuckles were white where he gripped his pen. Dr. Callahan cleared his throat. "Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Finals are next week. June 18th, 9 a.m. sharp. This is your future. Don't be late." Patricia took the 4 train to the 6 train and walked straight into Mount Sinai Hospital. Her mother, Grace Pierce, 41 years old, lay in a bed in the oncology ward. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The oxygen tube running to her nose hissed softly. She'd lost so much weight her collarbones looked like coat hangers under skin. Her eyes had sunken deep into her skull. "How did it go, baby?" Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "I made finals, Mama." Patricia sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle the 4-line. "They said I'm the one." Grace's skeletal hand found Patricia's. "Then you go. You go and you don't look back. I'm not leaving you." Patricia Marie Pierce. Grace squeezed her hand with what little strength she had left. "You will not waste this." The doctor entered without knocking. He had the look of someone who delivered bad news so many times it no longer registered as tragedy, just information. "We need to talk about hospice timelines." June 18th, 9 a.m. Patricia sat in a chair beside her mother's hospital bed, holding Grace's hand. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Grace had been unconscious for 6 hours, her breathing labored and irregular, the heart monitor beeping in a rhythm that made Patricia's stomach clench. The phone buzzed again. A text, "Where are you? Finals started 15 minutes ago." Patricia typed back with one hand, the other still holding her mother's. "My mother is dying. I can't come." The response came 30 seconds later. "If you're not here in 30 minutes, you forfeit." Patricia looked at her mother. Grace's chest rose and fell in shallow, rattling breaths. The monitor beeped. Slow. Irregular. Wrong. Patricia turned off her phone. Grace Pierce died 6 days later. June 24th, 3:47 a.m. Patricia was there. Her father showed up 2 hours before the end. The same man who'd walked out 2 months earlier when the medical bills started piling up and Grace's hair started falling out in clumps. And Marcus, 7 years old, already showing the signs that would later be diagnosed as autism, sat in the corner and didn't speak. He just rocked back and forth, humming the melody from Der Holly Rake. 2 weeks later, Roderick Vaylor appeared on the podcast Arts and Ambition. 48,000 subscribers. The host had a smooth NPR voice and asked the question Patricia would hear echoing for the next 7 years. What happened with that phenomenal soprano everyone was talking about? Patricia Pierce. Roderick's response was practiced, disappointed, dripping with the kind of concern that sounds generous until you hear what's underneath. Incredible natural talent, yes. But talent without discipline is just noise. She missed the finals, didn't even call, didn't explain, just didn't show up. That tells you everything about her character. She clearly didn't want it enough. The clip went semi-viral. 50,000 views in 3 days. Manhattan School of Music sent an email. We've decided to go in another direction. New England Conservatory, we're looking for committed artists. Every audition Patricia showed up to after that, someone recognized her name. Oh, you're the one who walked out on Juilliard. She was 16 years old. Her mother was dead. Her father was gone. Marcus needed therapy she couldn't afford. And Roderick Vaylor won his first Tony Award. Patricia Pierce chose love over ambition. The world called her irresponsible. Roderick Vaylor called her undisciplined. And for 7 years, she lived with that label carved into her future like a scar. If you believe some choices are worth the cost, if you think one person's courage can rewrite the ending, don't let this story disappear. Subscribe. Because what happens next proves that the truth doesn't stay buried forever. But what Patricia didn't know, what she couldn't have known while watching her mother die, was that the man who destroyed her career had done it deliberately. Because Roderick Vaylor had sat in that audition room, heard her sing, and realized something terrifying. She was better than him. And in 7 years, he would be standing on a stage, forcing her to prove it in front of 3.4 million people. 7 years later, Patricia Pierce lived at 2847 Grand Concourse in the Bronx. Studio apartment, 450 square feet, $1,850 a month. The heating worked in only half the room, so she'd pushed Marcus's fold-out cot against the radiator and slept on the futon that doubled as their couch. Roaches lived in the kitchenette. She'd stopped trying to kill them all and just focused on keeping them out of the food. Marcus was 12 now. Nonverbal, autistic. He communicated through an AAC device, a tablet that turned his finger taps into a robotic voice. He slept curled on his side, headphones on, listening to the recordings Patricia made of herself singing Pai Jesu on loop. Patricia worked 3 jobs. Job 1, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., live-in nanny for Levi and Catherine Garrison at 784 Park Avenue on the Upper East Side. She cared for their 5-year-old daughter Isla, lived in a converted storage closet during weekdays, and made $650 a week, $33, $800 a year with no benefits. The commute from the Bronx took an hour and 20 minutes on the 4 train to the 6 train. Job 2, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., cleaning crew at Lincoln Center. She mopped floors in David Geffen Hall, emptied trash in the Metropolitan Opera House, and sometimes, when no one was watching, she'd pause near the ventilation grates and listen to the rehearsals. Phantom of the Opera. La Boheme. Singers whose voices filled the theater like something holy. Job 3, 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., night shift waitress at Cosmic Diner on Broadway. She refilled coffee for drunk tourists and Columbia students pulling all-nighters, smiled when they left $2 tips on $40 checks, and didn't complain because she needed every cent. She slept 4 hours a night. Maximum. Marcus needed ABA therapy. Applied behavioral analysis, the only treatment that had ever helped him. It cost $68,000 a year. Medicaid covered $22,000. Patricia had to cover the $46,000 gap, and she was currently $8,200 behind. Bright Futures Behavioral Center had called 3 days ago. A woman with a kind voice and a script she'd clearly read 100 times. "We understand the financial burden, Ms. Pierce, but without payment within 14 days, we'll have to discharge Marcus from the program." If Marcus lost his therapy spot, the waiting list to get back in was 6 months. His behavioral regression could be permanent. Before therapy, Marcus had violent meltdowns 3 to 4 times a week. Headbanging until his forehead bruised. Biting himself until he drew blood. Screaming for 2 hours straight while Patricia held him and sang and prayed he wouldn't hurt himself badly enough to need the ER. The therapy had reduced the meltdowns to once or twice a week. A massive improvement. A miracle, really. But the only thing that always calmed him, every single time without fail, was Patricia singing Pai Jesu. The nurses at Bright Futures had noticed it. They'd pull her aside and say, "His heart rate stabilizes when you sing. We can see it on the monitor." Marcus would type on his AAC device, the robotic voice speaking words he couldn't. "Sister, sing. I safe." Every night at 1:30 a.m., Patricia came home from the diner. Her aunt stayed with Marcus on weeknights, sleeping on the futon Patricia would reclaim when she got home. Marcus would be asleep, headphones on, listening to her recordings. Patricia would slip into the bathroom, the only private space in 450 square feet, and turn on the shower to muffle the sound. Then she'd practice. Coloratura soprano arias. Der Holly Rake. Casta Diva. The Queen of the Night. She'd record herself on a cracked iPhone 8, play it back, study every breath and transition. She had a worn copy of The Art of Bel Canto that she'd shoplifted from a bookstore when she was 16, hidden under the sink behind the cleaning supplies. She followed YouTube vocal coaches because she couldn't afford real lessons. Her range had expanded. C4 to F6, whistle register to G6. She was better now than she'd been at 15. But no one knew. No one could know. The Garrisons would think she was above her station if they knew their nanny had once been a Juilliard finalist. Better to be invisible. Every day, Patricia walked past the Metropolitan Opera. Saw the posters for productions she'd never attend. Tickets started at $150 and climbed from there. She cleaned the toilets in Carnegie Hall, where Roderick Vaylor had a residency. 12 shows a year, $450 to $2,500 per ticket. She lived 7.4 miles from the Upper East Side. It might as well have been another planet. For 5 years, Patricia Pierce had been invisible. The nanny who picked up Isla's toys. The cleaner who emptied the Met's trash cans. The waitress who refilled coffee at 11 p.m. without making eye contact. She was 20 years old and had already accepted that her voice would die in a Bronx bathroom, heard by no one except a brother who couldn't speak. But in 2 weeks, Roderick Vaylor was hosting his annual charity gala. And Marcus's face was about to appear on a screen in front of 3.4 million people. What happened next would force Patricia to choose, stay silent and survive, or sing once and risk everything. The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock, embossed gold lettering announcing Roderick Vaylor's 8th annual Voices of Tomorrow Gala. Saturday, November 16th, 7 p.m. The Plaza Hotel, Grand Ballroom. 650 guests at $800 per ticket. Over $500,000 before the night even started. The stated purpose, printed in elegant script, raising funds for music therapy for children with autism. The exact therapy Marcus needed. The therapy Patricia was $8,200 behind on. The therapy he'd lose in 14 days. Catherine Garrison found Patricia folding laundry in the Upper East Side penthouse and handed her the invitation like it was a work assignment. You'll need to come to keep Isla calm during the performance. She gets restless at these things. Wear something presentable. Patricia owned one formal dress. A $35 navy sheath from Target she bought 3 years ago. She'd be required to stay in the service corridor backstage, not the main ballroom. Staff wasn't meant to be visible. Caterers, security, coat check, they all understood the hierarchy. Eyes down. No eye contact with the guests. The live stream would reach 3.4 million people. Roderick's biggest audience ever. Patricia arrived at the plaza at 4 p.m. with Isla, who'd already had one tantrum in the car about her dress being itchy. The child was napping now in the green room, finally calm, while Patricia cleaned up spilled apple juice from the earlier meltdown. That's when she heard the music. Sound check was happening on stage. She moved closer to the corridor doorway, just close enough to see through the gap in the velvet curtains. Roderick Vaylor stood center stage in shirt sleeves, no jacket yet, running through Nessun Dorma. The orchestra played the opening bars. His voice sounded good in the lower registers, controlled, professional, exactly what you'd expect from a 2-time Tony winner. Then came the climactic moment. Vincero. I will win. The moment that required a sustained B4, that soaring note at 493.88 Hz that defines the entire aria. Roderick's voice cracked at F number 4, nearly half an octave below where it should have been. He stopped abruptly, fury flashing across his face. Emmett, goddammit, the track isn't loud enough. Patricia froze. Emmett Slade's voice came through the sound booth speaker, apologetic but firm. Any louder and people will notice it's not blending. I don't care. Make it work or you're fired. Patricia had perfect pitch. She could identify frequencies by ear the way some people could identify colors. And underneath Roderick's voice, she heard it clearly, the playback track. A female voice, pitch shifted down, creating a metallic digital sheen that didn't quite blend with the orchestra. He was lip-syncing. Had been for years, probably. Her hands shook as she pulled out her phone. Searched, Roderick Vaylor Juilliard Committee. Found the podcast from 7 years ago. His voice still dripping with practice disappointment. Talent without discipline is just noise. She clearly didn't want it enough. She searched, Voices of Tomorrow Foundation tax filing. Found the IRS Form 990. Public record. Anyone could access it, but no one ever did. Total raised annually, $1.2 million. Program expenses, $87,000. 7.25%. The rest disappeared into Roderick's production company, 45%, and administrative costs at 38%, with another 9.75% for marketing and fundraising. She kept searching. Aurelia Maddox singer. LinkedIn profile, studio session work various artists, NDA compliance. Album credits for Timeless Voices. Fine print at the bottom, additional choir, A. Maddox. Not additional choir. The actual high notes Roderick couldn't hit. Patricia returned to the green room. The monitor on the wall showed Roderick's promotional video on loop. Smiling children in therapy centers. Art supplies. Musical instruments. Text overlay promising hope and healing. Then Marcus's face appeared. 30 seconds of footage from Bright Futures Behavioral Center. Her 12-year-old brother sitting at a table, using his AAC device, tapping out words with careful concentration. The camera caught his small smile, the one he only showed when he felt safe. Text overlay, Marcus Pierce, age 12, finding his voice through music. Patricia hadn't known he was in the video. Bright Futures must have gotten consent from her aunt, Marcus's legal guardian, without telling her. They'd used his face to raise money that would never reach him. Tears burned hot behind her eyes. 7%. That's all Marcus would ever see from tonight's $500,000 spectacle. Maybe $36,000 spread across 3 therapy centers. While Roderick pocketed hundreds of thousands, standing on a stage lip-syncing to a woman's voice and calling it philanthropy. Patricia Pierce stood in a service corridor, watching her brother's face on a screen, knowing that the man about to perform in front of 3.4 million people was lying. About his voice. About his charity. About everything. She could stay silent. Go back to the Bronx. Keep her job. Keep Marcus in therapy for another 2 weeks before the money ran out anyway. Or she could step into that ballroom and tell the truth. What she didn't know was that Roderick Vaylor had already decided to drag her onto that stage. Not because he wanted to humiliate her. Because he was terrified of her. 6 o'clock. 1 hour before doors opened. Patricia sat on a folding chair in the service corridor, phone clutched in both hands, thoughts racing in circles that kept coming back to the same impossible math. Who would believe a nanny over a Grammy winner? She'd lose her job. Levi Garrison had $3.2 million invested in Roderick's Carnegie Hall residency. He'd fire her in a heartbeat to protect that. Marcus would lose therapy in 14 days anyway. She had $127 in her bank account. She couldn't afford a lawyer. Roderick Vaylor had destroyed people for less than what she was thinking about doing. But then Marcus's face appeared on the monitor again. That small smile. And the number that wouldn't leave her head, 7.25%. Patricia put in her earbuds and opened Spotify. Searched for Roderick's album Timeless Voices, and found Nessun Dorma. She'd listened to this recording before years ago, when she was still trying to understand how someone with his reputation could have voted against her. She listened differently now. The opening was definitely Roderick's voice. She recognized the timbre, the slight nasality in his middle register. But when the aria climbed to the climactic B4, something changed. The formant frequencies were wrong. Formants are the resonance patterns unique to each voice, determined by the shape and size of the vocal tract. Male and female larynxes produce different harmonic overtones because of structural differences. Shorter vocal folds in women create different acoustics. The high notes on this track had female larynx structure. 2 different singers on the same recording. She switched to YouTube. Searched, Roderick Vaylor live performance Nessun Dorma. Found 12 videos from concerts spanning 5 years. Carnegie Hall. The Met. Boston Symphony Hall. In every single video, at the exact moment of the high B4, the camera cut away. Zoomed to the orchestra. Panned to the audience. In 3 videos where the camera stayed on Roderick, his mouth moved but the sound was too perfect. No breath distortion, no strain, no human imperfection. One video from Carnegie Hall in 2021 caught something else. A wide shot that included the sound booth. Emmett Slade, finger on the soundboard, pressing something down at the exact moment Roderick's mouth opened for the high note. She scrolled to the comments. Someone had written, "Is it just me or does it sound pre-recorded?" 42 upvotes. buried under hundreds of comments praising his unmatched talent. Patricia downloaded the Form 990 for Voices of Tomorrow Foundation. The 2022 tax filing was 37 pages of dense financial reporting that most people would never read. Total raised, $1,247,000. Program expenses, $87,340. 7%. Salaries, $561,150, including $425,000 to Valor Productions, LLC. Administrative costs, $473,860. Marketing, $124,650. She found the board member list. All personal friends. A Broadway producer. A socialite. Levi Garrison. Not a single child development expert or medical professional. Only 3 therapy centers had received funds. Average distribution, $29,000 each. She searched deeper. Aurelia Maddox, soprano, Austin. Found an interview from 2019 on a small classical music blog. The interviewer asked about her career. Aurelia's response was careful, practiced. I've done session work for major artists, but NDAs prevent me from sharing details. Patricia stared at the name. Aurelia Maddox. She knew that name. They'd been roommates at a pre-Juilliard summer program when Patricia was 14. Aurelia was 15, already technically brilliant but lacking the natural gift Patricia had. They'd practiced together, critiqued each other's performances, stayed up late talking about the future. They'd lost touch after Patricia's mother died. Patricia had never known Aurelia made it into the industry. Then she remembered something else. The anonymous money orders. For 2 years, $200 had arrived at her Bronx apartment every month. No return address. Just a postal stamp from Austin, Texas. She'd thought it was a charity. Maybe a mistake. She'd needed it too badly to ask questions. Aurelia had been trying to help her. All this time, Aurelia had known what Roderick did and had been paying penance the only way she could without breaking her NDA. Patricia looked at the evidence on her phone. Looked at Marcus's face frozen on the monitor. Thought about Roderick Valor sitting in that Juilliard audition room 7 years ago, hearing her sing, and choosing to destroy her career because she'd chosen her dying mother over an audition. He'd called her undisciplined. Told the world she didn't want it enough. And for 7 years, he'd been lip-syncing his way to millions, stealing from kids like Marcus, sleeping soundly. Something ignited in Patricia's chest. Not anger. Resolve. Patricia Pierce was 20 years old, making $33,800 a year, with $127 in her bank account. She was about to challenge a man worth $18 million who had the legal system, the industry, and the world on his side. She had nothing but the truth. If you believe that's enough, if you think one person with evidence can take down an empire of lies, subscribe now. Because what happens next will make you believe it's possible. Patricia deleted the notes on her phone. Stood up. Smoothed her $35 Target dress. She wasn't going to announce anything publicly. Wasn't going to make a scene. She was going to wait. Wait for Roderick to perform. Wait for him to lip-sync in front of 3.4 million people. And if the opportunity came, if he challenged her, if he put her on that stage, she'd sing it live. She'd prove what he couldn't do. Patricia Pierce made a promise to herself. If Roderick Valor gave her a microphone tonight, she would show the world exactly what he'd been faking for 8 years. What she didn't know was that in 45 minutes, he would drag her onto that stage in front of 650 guests and 3.4 million viewers. Not to give her a chance. To destroy her. The orchestra began. The opening notes of Der Holly Rake filled the plaza's grand ballroom like a dare wrapped in silk. Patricia Pierce closed her eyes for 1 second. Felt the spotlights burning against her skin. Heard 650 people holding their breath. Knew that 3.4 million people were watching through screens, waiting for her to fail. She opened her mouth and sang. The first phrase came out clear and controlled. Not tentative. Not apologetic. The aria is written as the Queen of the Night's Rage, a mother threatening eternal damnation if her daughter refuses to commit murder. Patricia had spent 5 years practicing this in a Bronx bathroom at 1:30 in the morning, and every ounce of that desperation poured into the sound. The melody climbed. D5. E5. F5. Her voice followed effortlessly, each note placed with surgical precision. No strain. No hesitation. Roderick's smile began to falter. The aria reached the bridge. This was where most sopranos struggled, where the tessitura sat uncomfortably high and required absolute technical control. Patricia sailed through it like she was walking through a room she'd lived in her entire life. Then came the moment that separated amateurs from masters. The sustained F6. 1396.91 Hz. One of the highest notes in the operatic repertoire, requiring a soprano to access her whistle register while maintaining a pure, resonant tone. Patricia hit it and held it for 5 seconds. Crystal clear. No waver. No crack. Just a sound so pure it seemed to vibrate in the chandeliers themselves. But she wasn't finished. She pushed higher. G6. A note Roderick's backing track had never dared attempt. A note that existed at the absolute edge of human vocal capability. The sound cut through the ballroom like light through water. When she finished, the silence was absolute. Not polite pause silence. Shocked silence. The kind of silence that happens when people witness something they didn't know was possible. Then the ballroom exploded. 650 people leapt to their feet. The applause was deafening, rolling through the room in waves. Someone in the front row was crying. A Broadway producer Patricia, recognized from magazines, was shaking his head in disbelief. Roderick Vaylor stood frozen at the edge of the stage, his face drained of color. Then Emmett Slade walked out from the sound booth. The applause stuttered, confused. Emmett crossed the stage slowly, deliberately, until he stood beside Patricia under the spotlights. He was 47 years old, had been Roderick's sound engineer for 8 years, and looked like a man who'd been carrying a secret so heavy it had bent his spine. He took the microphone from the stand. "I've been Roderick's engineer for 8 years, Emmett said. His voice was steady despite the tremor in his hands. That high note Ms. Pierce just sang? The one in Nessun Dorma, that made Roderick famous." The ballroom held its breath. "He's never sung it once. Not in 8 years. It's always been playback. A studio singer named Aurelia Maddox recorded it. We've been using her tracks at every performance." The silence that followed was different now. Colder. Sharper. Roderick's face twisted. He lunged forward, grabbing a microphone, forgetting, or not caring, that it was live. "You're fired, Emmett. And you," he pointed at Patricia, his voice rising to a shout. "You and your sick brother will regret this. I will destroy you. I will." He stopped. Realized what he'd said. Realized it had been broadcast to 3.4 million people. The live stream chat was already exploding. Did he just threaten her brother? Someone clip that. He's been faking it? 50K shares in 30 seconds. Within 60 seconds, the clip was everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Roderick Vaylor threatening a nanny and her sick brother after being exposed for lip-syncing for 8 years. The sponsors in the audience, Rolex, Mercedes-Benz, American Express, were already reaching for their phones. Patricia stood center stage, still holding the microphone, her $35 Target dress soaked with sweat under the lights. She looked at Roderick Vaylor, 2-time Tony winner, Grammy laureate, the man who had destroyed her career 7 years ago, and watched his empire crack like glass hitting marble. "I didn't lie," Patricia said quietly into the microphone. "You did." The ballroom erupted again, but this time it wasn't applause. It was chaos. Patricia woke up at 6:47 a.m. to her phone vibrating like a trapped hornet. 43 missed calls. 217 text messages. Her email inbox showed 1,847 unread. The first headline she saw made her stomach drop: "Nanny's Revenge. Bitter ex-finalist sabotages charity gala." They'd moved fast. Coordinated. Professional. The second article was worse. Sources close to Pierce family claim history of mental instability. No sources named. No evidence cited. Just poison dressed up as journalism. By 7:15 a.m., there were photos of her Bronx apartment online. The peeling paint. The broken security gate. The overflowing dumpster. Caption: "This is where Patricia Pierce lives while she accuses Roderick Vaylor of fraud, clearly desperate for attention and money." At 7:43 a.m., Levi Garrison called. His voice was cold, corporate, the tone of a man protecting a $3.2 million investment. Your services are no longer required. We'll send your final paycheck. Leave your keys with the doorman. Mr. Garrison, I can explain. You ambushed a guest at a private event. You've embarrassed my family. There's nothing to explain. The line went dead. At 9 a.m., a process server knocked on her door. Legal papers, official and terrifying. Roderick Vaylor was suing her for $15 million. Defamation. Tortious interference. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit didn't just target Patricia. It named Aurelia Maddox, Emmett Slade, and Bright Futures Behavioral Center, the therapy center where Marcus received treatment. Strategic litigation. Not meant to win. Meant to terrorize everyone into silence by bankrupting them with legal fees. Patricia made $33,800 a year. She had $127 in her bank account. A lawsuit this size would crush her before it ever saw a courtroom. At 2 p.m., Marcus had the worst meltdown he'd had in 2 years. Patricia's aunt called, voice shaking. He saw something online. People saying terrible things about you. He's been hitting his head against the wall for 40 minutes. I can't, Patricia, there's blood. They met at the ER at Mount Sinai, the same hospital where Patricia's mother had died 7 years earlier. Marcus sat on the examination table, rocking back and forth, a 3-stitch laceration across his forehead where he'd split the skin open. He wouldn't look at Patricia. Wouldn't use his AAC device. Just rocked and hummed the melody from Der Holly Rake. The doctor said he'd be fine physically. The emotional damage was harder to measure. At 4:17 p.m., Bright Futures Behavioral Center called. Ms. Pierce, given the current legal situation and the inclusion of our center in Mr. Vaylor's lawsuit, we need to protect our organization. We require payment of the outstanding $8,200 within 48 hours, or we'll have to permanently discharge Marcus from the program. 48 hours. 2 days to find money she didn't have or watch her brother lose the only treatment that helped him. At 6 p.m., a woman in a charcoal Armani suit appeared at Patricia's apartment door. Olivia Sterling, attorney for Roderick Vaylor. She carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Patricia made in 3 months. Ms. Pierce, I'm here to resolve this unfortunate situation. She placed a document on the kitchen table. Settlement agreement. Patricia would sign a statement saying she fabricated the allegations against Roderick. That she was bitter about not getting into Juilliard. That she staged the entire incident for attention and money. In exchange, $185,000. Enough to cover Marcus's therapy. Enough to pay rent for 2 years. Enough to breathe. Sign this, Olivia said, her voice smooth as glass, and everyone moves on. Or refuse, and watch your brother lose his therapy while you drown in legal fees you can't afford. Your choice. Patricia stared at the paper. At the number. At Marcus sitting on the futon, his forehead bandaged, still rocking. Then Marcus reached for his AAC device. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, tapping out words. Sister. Sing. True. He looked at Patricia for the first time since the meltdown. Tapped again. You. Teach. Me. Brave. The robotic voice spoke his words into the silence of their 450-square-foot apartment with roaches in the kitchenette and heating that only worked in half the room. Patricia looked at Olivia Sterling. At the settlement agreement. At the $185,000 that could save her brother. No. Olivia's eyebrows lifted. Excuse me. I won't sign it. Patricia's voice was steady despite her hands shaking. I won't teach my brother that telling the truth is worth less than money. Ms. Pierce, I don't think you understand the consequences. I understand perfectly. But he's watching. And I won't show him that fear is stronger than truth. Olivia closed her briefcase. You'll regret this. Maybe. But at least I'll be able to look at him. The door closed. Patricia sat beside Marcus on the futon and wrapped her arms around him. He didn't pull away. She had 48 hours to find $8,200 she didn't have. A $15 million lawsuit she couldn't fight. No job. No plan. But she had the truth. And for the first time in 7 years, that felt like enough. The video dropped at 11:47 p.m., 18 hours after Patricia refused the settlement. Aurelia Maddox sat in a recording studio in Austin, Texas, gold records lining the wall behind her. Blonde, 32 years old, wearing a simple black t-shirt. She looked directly into the camera. "My name is Aurelia Maddox. I'm a studio singer. And I am the voice Roderick Vaylor has been selling as his own for the past 8 years." She held up a stack of contracts. NDAs with Roderick's signature. Session logs. Payment receipts showing $3,500 per track. 48 tracks total over 8 years. Patricia Pierce told the truth. "I sang those high notes. All of them. And I stayed silent because I was afraid. But watching her lose everything for being brave, I can't do that anymore." The video had been posted for 6 minutes. It already had 200,000 views. Within 3 hours, 7 other studio singers came forward, each with their own contracts, their own NDAs, their own stories of being paid to sing for artists who couldn't hit the notes they claimed as theirs. The domino effect was immediate and catastrophic for Roderick. By morning, a lawyer named Melissa Morales called Patricia's phone. She specialized in First Amendment cases and had a reputation for taking on powerful people who weaponized the legal system. "What he's doing to you is called a SLAPP suit. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed to silence you through financial terror. I'd like to represent you pro bono." Why? Because what you did was right. And the legal system shouldn't be a weapon for the wealthy to silence people who tell the truth. The preliminary hearing happened 4 days later. Davidson County Courthouse, Judge Patricia Donovan presiding. Roderick's legal team filled one entire table, 5 attorneys in suits that cost more than Patricia's annual salary. Melissa sat alone beside Patricia. Roderick's lead counsel argued for an immediate injunction. "Your Honor, Ms. Pierce's defamatory statements have caused irreparable harm to my client's reputation and career." Judge Donovan cut him off. "I've reviewed the evidence submitted by both parties. Ms. Morales, you've included spectral analysis of Mr. Vaylor's recordings." "Yes, Your Honor. It proves 2 distinct vocal signatures on tracks credited solely to Mr. Vaylor." "And Ms. Maddox's contracts?" "Authenticated and verified." Judge Donovan looked at Roderick. "Mr. Vaylor, I'm going to ask you a direct question. Can you sing the note at issue? The high B4 in Nessun Dorma?" Roderick's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client's ability to perform is not. It's entirely relevant. If Ms. Pierce's statements are false, Mr. Vaylor should be able to demonstrate that easily. Mr. Vaylor, please approach." The courtroom went silent. Roderick stood, walked to the witness stand. His face had gone pale. "Sing the climactic note from Nessun Dorma." "No accompaniment necessary. Just the note." Roderick opened his mouth. The sound that came out was weak, strained, cracking at E4, a full fifth below where it should have been. He tried again. Worse. Judge Donovan made a note. "For the record, that was not a B4. That wasn't even close. Your Honor, vocal strain from stress. Save it." Judge Donovan's voice was ice. "I've been on this bench for 23 years. I know a frivolous lawsuit when I see one. Ms. Pierce made truthful statements. The evidence supports every claim she made. The First Amendment protects truth, even when that truth is inconvenient for powerful people." She struck her gavel once. "The lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm sanctioning Mr. Vaylor $500,000 for filing a frivolous action intended to silence constitutionally protected speech. Ms. Pierce, you're free to continue telling your story." The gavel came down again. Roderick's attorneys were already on their phones. Damage control. Crisis management. But it was too late. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Patricia stood on the steps with Melissa, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. "Ms. Pierce, how does it feel to win?" Patricia thought about Marcus. About her mother. About 7 years of silence. "It feels like I can finally breathe." That night, the clip of Roderick failing to sing in court went viral. 12 million views in 6 hours. His sponsors withdrew. Carnegie Hall canceled his residency. The Tony Awards committee announced they were reviewing his wins. And in a Bronx apartment, Marcus typed on his AAC device, "Sister Brave. Sister Win." Patricia held him and cried. The phone call came at 6:23 a.m., 2 days after the court dismissed Roderick's lawsuit. "Ms. Pierce. This is calling on behalf of Yo-Yo Ma." Patricia thought it was a prank. The world-famous cellist didn't call nannies in the Bronx. "Mr. Ma watched the video of your performance. He'd like to cover Marcus's therapy costs. Full tuition for 5 years. $340,000. Patricia sat down on the futon before her legs gave out. Within 24 hours, 3 more calls came. Alicia Keys offered to cover all post-therapy support services. A GoFundMe started by someone Patricia had never met raised $180,000 in 6 hours. Juilliard called with an apology and a full scholarship offer that Patricia politely declined. She'd already accepted one from Manhattan School of Music. The money wasn't charity. It was restitution from a world that had watched her get destroyed and done nothing. But the real change happened in places Patricia would never see. 18 months later, New York passed the Pierce Transparency Act. Any live performance using pre-recorded vocals had to disclose it clearly on tickets and promotional materials. Penalties: $50,000 per violation plus full refunds to ticket holders. Within 2 years, 14 other states adopted similar laws. The Recording Academy rewrote its rules. All contributing vocalists had to be credited. Additional vocals was no longer acceptable. Studio singers who'd been invisible for decades suddenly had names. The Tony Awards committee revoked both of Roderick's wins. The Grammy nomination he'd received that year was withdrawn. Carnegie Hall terminated his contract and updated its requirements. Artists had to certify they were performing live. A studio singers' union formed. Aurelia Maddox became its first president. 1,400 members in the first year. Minimum $10,000 per track. Mandatory credit. No NDAs. Roderick Vaylor filed for bankruptcy. $9.7 million in debt. Legal fees. Settlement payments. The class action lawsuit from ticket holders who'd paid to see him perform live spanned 8 years and recovered $8.3 million. 6 months after the bankruptcy filing, Roderick announced a comeback. Unplugged and Raw tour. Intimate venues. Just him and a piano. A return to authenticity. The first show was at a 300-seat club in Newark. 23 people showed up. 8 were journalists. He tried to sing Nessun Dorma without playback. His voice cracked at E4. He walked off stage after 4 songs. The video went viral. The Fall of the Phantom Tenor. 12 million views in 48 hours. The last anyone heard, he was teaching an online course called Introduction to Music Business for $49.99 a month on Udemy. Patricia signed with an independent label called Unheard Voices Records. Her debut album was titled Silence No More, 10 tracks co-written with Aurelia Maddox. Songs about reclaiming your voice. About refusing to stay quiet. About the cost of telling the truth. It went gold in 8 months. 500,000 copies. But the moment that mattered most happened on a Tuesday afternoon in Patricia's Bronx apartment. Marcus was 13 now, still mostly nonverbal, still using his AAC device for most communication. Patricia was practicing in the bathroom, old habits die hard, when she heard something that made her stop mid-phrase. A voice. Small. Uncertain. Human. Pat sing pretty. She opened the bathroom door. Marcus was standing there, looking at her, and he'd spoken. Actually spoken. His first words in 13 years. Patricia dropped to her knees and held him while they both cried. 2 years after the Plaza Hotel Gala, Patricia Pierce returned to Carnegie Hall. Not to clean it. To perform. The concert was sold out. 2,800 seats. But Patricia had insisted on one change. Half the tickets were priced at $15 for students and working people. The other half funded scholarships through the foundation she'd started, Marcus's Voice, providing music therapy for children with autism. First year, $670,000 raised, 140 children receiving treatment. Marcus sat in the front row wearing a t-shirt that read "My sister saved me." Before Patricia sang, Marcus walked onto the stage with his AAC device. The spotlight found him. He typed carefully, deliberately, and the robotic voice spoke to 2,800 people. My sister. Saved. Me. The audience rose to its feet before Patricia sang a single note. She performed Der Holly Rake. Hit the F6 and held it for 7 seconds. Then pushed to G6, that impossible note at the edge of human capability, and the sound filled Carnegie Hall the way it was always meant to be filled, with truth. Where are you watching this story from? A big city where dreams get crushed? A small town where you're told to stay quiet? A corner of the world where you're fighting just to be heard? Patricia Pierce was a nanny making $650 a week, who took on an $18 million empire with nothing but the truth. And she won. If you believe one person's courage can change everything, if you think your voice matters even when the world says it doesn't, subscribe now. Because your story might be next. And when it is, you'll need to know that speaking up is worth the cost. Every voice matters. Even yours. Especially yours.